Our first story is about the terror of Pine Hollow. The haunting of Pine Hollow. Pine Hollow was a secluded village surrounded by dense woods. For decades, it remained untouched by the modern world, its residents bound by old traditions and superstitions. At the heart of Pine Hollow stood an abandoned mansion, known as Blackwood Manor. The mansion had been empty for years, shrouded in mystery and tales of hauntings. One autumn evening, a young couple, Sarah and Michael, moved into Pine Hollow, looking for a fresh start. Intrigued by the manor's dark history, they decided to explore it. The villagers warned them about the curse, but the couple dismissed the warnings as mere folklore. Armed with flashlights and curiosity, Sarah and Michael entered the mansion. The air inside was cold and stale, and the floorboards creaked under their feet. As they wandered through the dimly lit halls, they found old portraits of the Blackwood family, their eyes seeming to follow them. In the library, they discovered an old diary belonging to the last owner, Evelyn Blackwood. The final entry read, "The shadows whisper my name. They want my soul. I fear tonight will be my last." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but decided to take the diary with her. That night, back at their cottage, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She decided to read more of Evelyn's diary. As she read, the room grew colder. The entries described a dark entity that haunted the manor, a shadowy figure that fed on fear and despair. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a cold breeze swept through the room. Michael, sensing Sarah's unease, tried to comfort her, but a loud crash from the kitchen interrupted them. They rushed to the kitchen to find the window shattered, and the room plunged into darkness. They heard whispers, indistinct and chilling, coming from all around them. Sarah clutched the diary tightly, her heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, forming words, "Leave or suffer." Determined to uncover the truth, the couple decided to return to the manor the next day. They found a hidden door in the basement, leading to a dark tunnel. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the walls were lined with strange symbols. At the end of the tunnel, they found a small, hidden room with a stone altar. On the altar lay an ancient book, bound in leather and covered in dust. The book detailed rituals to summon and banish spirits. They realized that Evelyn had tried to banish the entity but failed. The last page was torn out, suggesting she never finished. Sarah and Michael decided to complete the ritual. They gathered the necessary items and returned to the manor. As they began the ritual, the temperature dropped drastically, and the shadows in the room seemed to come alive. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with malice. The entity moved towards them, whispering their names. Sarah recited the incantation from the book, her voice trembling. The entity screamed, a sound that echoed through the manor, and lunged at them. With a final shout, Sarah completed the ritual. The entity let out a deafening roar before dissolving into the shadows. The room fell silent, the oppressive energy lifting. They knew the entity was gone, but the fear lingered. The next morning, they left Pine Hollow, never to return. The villagers noticed a change in the manor. It no longer felt haunted. The story of Sarah and Michael became a legend, a warning to those who dared to disturb the past. Years later, the manor stood empty, but the villagers knew better than to enter. The shadows might have been banished, but the memories remained. Pine Hollow kept its secrets, waiting for the next curious soul to uncover its dark history. Our second story is about the forgotten house on Blackwood Lane. On the outskirts of the small, sleepy town of Bramblewood stood an old, decrepit house on Blackwood Lane. It was a place that locals avoided and never spoke about. Children dared each other to peek through its broken windows, but none had the courage to enter. The house had a dark history, one that was whispered about in hushed tones but never fully explained. One autumn evening, a young couple, Emily and Jack, moved to Bramblewood, unaware of the town's secrets. They had come from the city, seeking a quieter life and a fresh start. Emily was an artist, and Jack was a writer, both hoping the tranquility of the countryside would inspire their work. As they settled into their new home, they became curious about the old house on Blackwood Lane. Jack, always on the lookout for a good story, decided to investigate. He learned that the house had belonged to the Blackwood family, who had mysteriously disappeared one night over a century ago. The townsfolk believed the house was cursed, haunted by the spirits of the Blackwood family. Despite the warnings, Jack was determined to uncover the truth. Emily was hesitant but agreed to accompany him. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they made their way to the house one crisp, moonlit night. The front door creaked loudly as they pushed it open, revealing a dark, musty interior. The air was thick with dust, and cobwebs hung from every corner. As they explored the rooms, they found remnants of the Blackwood family's life, old photographs, children's toys, and furniture covered in white sheets. In the parlor, Emily discovered a portrait of the Blackwood family, a stern-looking man, a beautiful woman, and 2 young children. The eyes of the family seemed to follow them as they moved around the room, sending chills down their spines. They ventured upstairs, finding more evidence of the family's abrupt departure. Clothes were still hanging in the closets, and the beds were unmade. In one of the bedrooms, they found a diary belonging to the Blackwood daughter, Lily. The last entry was dated the night the family disappeared. "Something is wrong. Father says we must leave, but Mother won't go. I hear whispers in the night, calling my name. I'm scared." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the house, startling Emily and Jack. They rushed to the source of the noise, finding a broken vase in the hallway. As they bent down to examine it, the temperature dropped, and they felt a presence behind them. Turning around, they saw the faint outline of a woman in a long dress, her face contorted in sorrow. "Leave this place," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It is not safe." Before they could react, she vanished, leaving them shaken and terrified. Jack, more curious than ever, insisted on staying to find more clues, but Emily wanted to leave. They argued, the tension between them growing as the house seemed to close in around them. Reluctantly, Jack agreed to leave, but as they made their way downstairs, they heard footsteps behind them. Turning around, they saw the ghostly figures of the Blackwood children, their eyes wide with fear. The children reached out to them, their voices echoing through the halls. "Help us." Panicking, Emily and Jack ran for the front door, but it slammed shut before they could reach it. The house seemed to come alive, the walls closing in and the floorboards creaking under their weight. They were trapped. Desperate, Jack pulled out his phone and called the local historian, Mrs. Henderson, who had warned him about the house. Her voice was urgent. "You must find the locket. It holds the key to the curse." Racing against time, they searched the house for the locket. In the attic, they found an old trunk filled with personal items. Among them was a delicate silver locket, inside of which was a picture of the Blackwood family. As soon as Emily touched the locket, the house fell silent. The spirits of the Blackwood family appeared before them, their expressions softening. The woman who had first appeared to them stepped forward. "Thank you. The curse is lifted." With that, the spirits faded away, and the house returned to its decrepit state. The front door creaked open, allowing Emily and Jack to escape into the night. They returned home, exhausted and shaken, but grateful to be alive. The next day, they visited Mrs. Henderson, who explained that the locket had been a gift from Mr. Blackwood to his wife, a symbol of their love. When the family was torn apart by a tragic accident, their spirits became trapped in the house, cursed to relive their final moments until the locket was found and their souls set free. Emily and Jack's experience at the Blackwood house changed them forever. They wrote a book about their encounter, detailing the history of the house and the mystery they had solved. Their story brought them fame, but they never sought out another haunted location again. Our third story is about the silent farmhouse, a scary place to live. In the rolling hills of rural Vermont, nestled among dense forests and winding dirt roads, stood an old farmhouse that had been abandoned for decades. The locals called it the silent farmhouse, a name born from the eerie stillness that enveloped the property. No birds sang in its trees, no animals roamed its fields, and even the wind seemed to avoid it. The farmhouse had a dark history, one that the townsfolk rarely discussed. It was said that the last family to live there, the Crowleys, had vanished without a trace one cold winter night. Theories ranged from foul play to supernatural forces, but no one knew for sure. The house had remained empty ever since, slowly decaying and falling into disrepair. One summer, a group of friends, Rachel, Ben, Lucy, and Tom, decided to spend their vacation exploring the countryside. They had heard the stories about the silent farmhouse and, being lovers of the paranormal, were eager to investigate. They packed their camping gear and set off, determined to spend a night in the infamous house. They arrived at the farmhouse in the late afternoon. The building was in worse shape than they had imagined, with broken windows, peeling paint, and a sagging roof. A sense of foreboding hung in the air, but they were undeterred, setting up their tents in the overgrown yard. They prepared for a night of ghost hunting. As dusk settled, they ventured inside the house, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The interior was just as dilapidated as the outside, with furniture covered in dust and cobwebs draped over every surface. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and rot. In the living room, they found an old family photo album on a rickety coffee table. Flipping through its pages, they saw images of the Crowley family, a stern-looking father, a smiling mother, and 2 young children. The last few pages were blank, as if the family's story had abruptly ended. "Let's split up and explore," Ben suggested, eager to cover more ground. Rachel and Lucy headed upstairs, while Ben and Tom took the ground floor. Rachel and Lucy found the children's bedrooms. Toys lay scattered on the floor, and faded drawings adorned the walls. As they investigated further, they heard a faint giggling sound, like that of a child. Rachel's heart raced as she whispered, "Did you hear that?" Lucy nodded, her face pale. Meanwhile, Ben and Tom were in the kitchen, where they discovered a diary hidden in a drawer. It belonged to Mrs. Crowley and detailed the family's life on the farm. The last entry was particularly unsettling. "The whispers are getting louder. I fear for our safety. Something is in this house with us." Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and they heard footsteps coming from the hallway. They exchanged nervous glances and followed the sound, which led them to the basement door. It was slightly ajar, and a cold draft wafted up from the darkness below. Gathering their courage, they descended into the basement. The air grew colder with each step, and their breath formed visible puffs in the air. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a small, makeshift altar with candles and strange symbols drawn in chalk. In the center of the altar was a locket. Back upstairs, Rachel and Lucy had moved to the master bedroom, where they found a large mirror with a crack running through it. As they examined the room, the mirror suddenly fogged up, and words appeared as if written by an unseen hand. "Help us." Panicking, they ran downstairs to find Ben and Tom. The 4 friends reunited in the living room, where Ben showed them the locket. "This must be important," he said. "We need to figure out what it means." As night fell, the house grew increasingly oppressive. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and the whispers became more distinct. The friends gathered in the living room, trying to make sense of their discoveries. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut, and all the windows blew open, letting in a howling wind. The room filled with a cold, malevolent presence. The friends huddled together as the ghostly figures of the Crowley family materialized before them. The mother stepped forward, her eyes filled with sorrow. "The locket," she whispered. "It holds the key to our release." Ben handed the locket to her, and she opened it to reveal a small photo of the family. A tear fell from her eye, and the ghostly figures began to fade. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. "We can finally rest." As the spirits vanished, the house seemed to sigh with relief. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the whispers ceased. The friends, though shaken, felt a sense of closure. The next morning, they left the silent farmhouse, leaving the locket behind as a symbol of the family's release. They returned to town, forever changed by their experience. The story of their night in the farmhouse spread, and while many still avoided the place, some believed the spirits had finally found peace. Rachel, Ben, Lucy, and Tom knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a real-life ghost story that would stay with them forever. They vowed never to return to the silent farmhouse, but were grateful to have been part of its final chapter. Our fourth and last story is about the old Victorian house, which has a dark history. In a small, quiet town, there lived a young woman named Emily. She had recently moved into an old Victorian house that had been abandoned for years. The townsfolk warned her about the house, whispering about the dark history it held, but Emily brushed off their concerns. She loved the house's charm, and saw it as the perfect place to start fresh. One night, as she was unpacking in her new bedroom, she discovered an ornate, antique mirror tucked away in the attic. It was tall, with a gilded frame and intricate carvings that depicted eerie, twisted faces. Despite its unsettling appearance, Emily decided to hang it in her bedroom. That night, as she was getting ready for bed, she glanced into the mirror and noticed something strange. Her reflection was delayed, moving a fraction of a second after she did. She dismissed it as an old mirror, playing tricks on her tired mind. Days passed, and the strange occurrences grew more frequent. Objects in the house would move on their own, doors would creak open, and the temperature would drop inexplicably. But the mirror was the worst. Emily would catch glimpses of shadows moving behind her, but when she turned around, nothing was there. Her reflection seemed to watch her, eyes following her every move, even when she stood still. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard a soft whispering coming from the mirror. It was faint, like a distant echo, but it grew louder and more insistent. Emily approached the mirror cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who are you?" she whispered, her breath fogging up the glass. For a moment, there was silence. Then, her reflection smiled, a sinister, twisted grin that sent chills down her spine. "I am you," it whispered back, its voice a distorted version of her own. "I've been waiting for you." Terrified, Emily tried to look away, but her eyes were locked onto the mirror. Her reflection reached out, a hand emerging from the glass, and grabbed her wrist with an icy grip. She screamed, struggling to break free, but the hand pulled her closer, dragging her into the mirror. The next morning, the townsfolk found the house empty. Emily was gone, vanished without a trace. The only sign of her was the mirror, now cracked and covered in a thin layer of frost. Her reflection, forever trapped, stared out from the other side, her eyes pleading for release. But the mirror remained silent, its dark secrets hidden within its glass.